We often think that tech's the answer to all of these questions in our day-to-day lives, but it's causing its own problems from a sustainability point of view, which you've heard me talk about.
How do we get across the top three things in each area to really push on the value of what our customers look in, linking it to the kind of desired outcome, but also trying to cover the basis that we expect those buyer personas to have?
How do you navigate all this noise, and then how do you decide what's important when you're trying to win these projects?
And just play catch, not ping pong. And that kind of approach of catching it, whereas perhaps that kind of ping pong effect would kind of creep into the service.
I like that analogy. You take hold of the problem, you own the problem, you don't just try and get it back over the net. Now, how do you weave that into overall narrative? How does it affect the solution, and how does then that affect the commercials? Yeah, how does that all weave together?
We're two tech CEOs talking about navigating the speed of change in the technology industry. This comes from the impact of tariffs, changing supply chains, opportunities with sustainability, getting the best value, but also, most importantly, winning new business. We're going to have an open, honest discussion, really sharing a bit different perspectives from our experiences in our businesses. I'm here with Anthony Levy, who started his business 17 years ago in a financial recession. All great businesses start in tough economic times, they say, and you've done very well. I mean, rapid growth, international expansion, and you've gone through some challenging times. So thinking about Brexit, COVID, supply chain shocks, and a hell of a lot of political change. And you're representing Circularity First, who's really focusing on profitable outcomes with sustainability and technology.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here and to be talking about how to thrive in times of uncertainty. Look, you've been on a pretty powerful journey yourself. 20 years in the tech industry, you've worked across software, distribution, telco, and IT services. You successfully led, I think it's 2 exits, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And now you're into Smart CT, which is a business that focuses on IT services and solutions across all of Europe. An award-winning organization. It's great to share this platform with you and really to dig into what it's like to run businesses like this.
Yeah, absolutely excited. So it's great to be here with you.
So into episode 4, Andy. I'm going to try and bring some of these concepts together now. We're going to talk about how value and sustainability is deciding who wins in public and private tech projects. But in the broader context, we're talking about how tech companies are driving shorter and shorter adoption cycles, which is only being accelerated by AI. We have this broader context of trade wars and tariffs. We often think that tech's the answer to all of these questions in our day-to-day lives, but it's causing its own problems from a sustainability point of view, which you've heard me talk about. But all the while, businesses are just trying to crack on, be cost effective, and find a way to be efficient and thrive. I'd like to kind of make this quite personal. So kind of for you as a CEO running your business, how do you navigate all this noise, and then how do you decide what's important when you're trying to win these projects?
Yeah, I think winning some of these large projects, the RFIs are getting more and more detailed on value, more detailed on are you actually going to deliver that service, and more detailed on sustainability. And I think that's, broadly over the last probably 7 or 8 years, I've seen more and more different buyer personas be involved in making decisions on buying. So you're starting to get some of those questions kind of all merge into the RFI process. So you've got to be really careful because it becomes really a big beast. And for some of the services and purchases people are making, it absolutely warrants that. You need a robust, diligent partner, so that you can say to your customer, I've done the right things, I've done the right checks and balances. So as part of that, putting that information in, you can almost get a bit carried away with writing all the detail to make sure we've done this, done that, and it can dilute the message. So, a lot of things we're discussing internally is about, well, how do we get across the top 3 things in each area to really push on the value of what our customers look in, linking it to the kind of desired outcome, but also trying to cover the basis that we expect those buyer personas to have, and what we've validated as part of our process to say, right, okay, well, what other people are involved in that bid.
That's really interesting. And as you said, as these kind of other areas that you didn't historically have in a tender, things like sustainability or whatever, appear in these tenders, how do you manage that kind of skill set? How do you manage kind of responding to those things, not even knowing who's on the other side of it? Is it a procurement person that's asking those questions, or is behind it? Is there a sustainability team? How do you, to your point, how do you weave that into overall narrative? How does it affect the solution, and how does then that affect the commercials? Yeah, how does that all weave together?
Yeah, well, if you put in most businesses have bid libraries, right? So that you can reuse some of the content you've put together before to make it more and more efficient. You could be using AI to do it for you, but obviously, we talk about those dashes and dots where people are kind of knowing that actually it was completely written by AI. That's fine. It helps you kind of get some way, but, you really want to make sure it is, tailored to that customer need, customer outcome. So, making sure that you've got the information easily accessible, you've got the information that's really tailored towards what does the customer want. But I probably haven't got a silver bullet for it, but it is tricky to get that balance whilst also having the backup. And a lot of things we're doing is saying, well, actually, well, look, here's what we think for this area of the RFI or RFP. But have a look on our website where you've got a link to this net zero report, or it could be a link to some of our policies about how we operate and how we behave in the society, local society, or how we manage our supply chain. We are doing, due diligence on our supply chain because, every business needs some suppliers to help them do it.
Yeah, really interesting. We've certainly seen sustainability and social value creep up in terms of the weighting in tenders. And one, I think that the tricky things for a lot of people is having the evidence, being able to actually provide the hard evidence to show those things are true. So anyone can say anything, but you've got to be able to back it up. You've got to be able to provide the evidence. But some people don't have a starting point for that. So what's your approach when you're asked to submit things that aren't just about you as a business, but about your solution? What do you do to evidence how your solution helps some of these broader areas that people are saying they care about now?
Yeah, well, from our proposition, we focus around circular economy services, right? So if you kind of look at the sustainability side, we've got a really clear and articulate story. But from a social value point of view or the business outcome, you're not putting your proposition out there to say that exactly going to fit your requirement for each deal. It's broad, it's focused, targeted on your ideal customer profile. But each customer's got a different need, different outcome that they want to do. So, it really is about people, right? Making sure that our people are sharp, focused on, right, what is the outcome and what are the top 3 things we're going to do to kind of help them deliver that. It's and that's been around for years. It's not just a new aspect to it. It's just becoming more broader and sometimes a bit trickier to kind of bring it all in together so you've got a succinct message.
If I can sort of bring you back to the conversation we had about lowest cost versus best value and that whole piece around service, how do you evidence that your service is better than the low cost competitor?
It's tricky, right? I think if you think about airlines, right? Ryanair's brilliant. It's going to get you from A to B. They might charge you a bit of extra for the for the luggage when it goes over 5 centimeters,
or
right?
the bathroom, apparently.
Or the bathroom, yeah. So it's difficult when you can see that the airline in our space, it's not exactly evident like those kind of frontline consumer organisations are, where you can say, well, actually, I can see it's a regulated market. You can see
There's a Trustpilot review, or
but I mean, like an airline, right, or a train service. You get those stats on who's delivered on time.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting it anecdotally about perhaps a competitor, whether it's a like for like or whether it's a different type of competitor. You don't necessarily have those evidence pieces on, how great is their service. You hear anecdotal, and naturally when we're all competing, we all hear about the bad things of someone else. But, I'm happy with competition in that way, because they're in a market that I believe is growing, and can evidence growing, it's great to have people still investing and wanting to invest in areas you're in. So it kind of gives you a bit of a validation that yes, you're in a great space. But making sure our customers understand it, we've really got to look at what we can control. We talked about it in a previous episode about what you can control. There are things out there with a competitor that I can't control, and what we can control is demonstrating and evidencing using data to prove, look, we do a great service here. We honour everything that we commit. No doubt, times things won't be perfect, but then we'll react to that. We'll react to it appropriately, and we can evidence that and give people data, stats, whatever it may be, to showcase it.
I guess it's when you've got existing customers and you're going for a renewal, they've felt the service, right? Well, presumably they have. Maybe they have not had failures and they might have to test it, but presumably over a sort of 3 to 5 year period, they probably have at some point. I guess it's hardest when it's a brand new customer, right? And they don't know you, and they don't have those validation points themselves yet, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then you might be dealing with somebody who's just worried about the commercial piece, but whilst they might hear that the service isn't that great, so it gives a compelling event for a new partner to come in. Well, it's you've just got to keep going. You've got to keep believing that is what we do. That's the ethos of our business. That's the culture, just control what you can control.
Have you ever thought about sort of trying to compete with those real low cost suppliers? Have you ever thought about and how would that change the culture in your business if you did?
This is a really interesting point. So we were talking about it recently, with together, you and I, is that could you offer a service that was super cheap service, you don't get all the bells and whistles, and when your request comes in, we'll treat it differently. Whereas you've got what I'm, hugely confident on is our business offering a great service, delivering to what we commit to our customers. And we thought about, well, imagine a request coming in to an agent, and that agent was, providing, really mission critical service to a customer, and then the next hour they get one which is perhaps on a lower version, and they're going to go, okay, well, don't worry about that. How does that creep into your culture as an organisation? So we've definitely spoken about that, and then what we ultimately shifted to is we absolutely aren't going to go there. Our culture is to deliver what we say, and if there are conversations that actually people want an alternative solution that might be a bit more cost effective, well, that comes down to a moderation in service, but not about the experience that they get from us, because that can really creep into your culture as an organisation. We have a theory of which I got from I'm going to call her out, a lady called Betsy Fallon I used to work for, and she said play catch, not ping pong, and that kind of approach of catching it, whereas perhaps that kind of ping pong effect would kind of creep into the service.
I like that analogy. You take hold of the problem, you own the problem, you don't just try and get it back over the net. No, that really resonates. And I guess if I'm going to try and bring this all back together, the landscape is changing, right? There is a lot of uncertainty, but I think the demands that clients are placing on technology companies are only getting more complex. They're layering over not just needing to be price competitive, but they're expecting sustainability, they're expecting great service, they're expecting even social value. So the skill sets in responding to them and delivering them are increasing too, right? All at the same time, whilst we're trying to keep these cost points stable. But I think what you and I have talked about is, whilst people have an expectation on cost, you've got to be able to talk about value. You've got to be able to show more value if you want more value in return. So don't just sit there expecting or getting upset about the fact that there's downward pressure on cost. We've got to illustrate that value. We've got to illustrate that value to different decision makers in these organizations now, and not just the traditional ones we work with. So in an increasingly complex environment, we've got to be reaching out to more people and demonstrating that value in a more clearer way. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think we've all, or many of us have identified what's our ideal customer profile. There are going to be some times where you get tempted to do something slightly different. Either have a go, or but stick to your core, stick to what you know you are great at, or what you can build upon what you're great at. You're just not going to win everything. It's natural, as much as we all really want to. But how do you getting yourself in the best foot forward and being kind of, I guess, true to your mission will get you there.
I think that's key, isn't it? So you've got to protect the brand, right? And just if you start cutting costs, for example, in your environment, you'd have to start to shift your culture. That would have to start to shift your brand. Certainly we see from a good way to protect value is to start to add things like sustainability into the mix. It allows you to differentiate, actually potentially charge a premium, add new services. So people might still want to compete, a really low cost point for a core service, but what can you layer back over the top that gets your margins back up or even beyond where you were before?
Love it.
Well, I've really enjoyed this afternoon going through some of these topics with you, Andy, and I look forward to doing more of these together in the future.
Likewise, Anthony. Loved it. Learned more as well every time I speak to you. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.